Hello, my name's Kingsley Singleton and welcome to this Photoshop Made Easy video lesson from Digital Photo, the UK's best-selling photography and imaging magazine. Hand colouring is a quick and easy way to make your shots stand out from the crowd and improve otherwise uninteresting pictures. It works really well on still lifes, floral images and portraits, and as you'll see in this lesson, the intensity of the effect is up to you. All the colour in our hand-coloured picture here is simply applied using the brush tool, and if you set it up the right way, you'll soon be able to paint in whatever colours you like. Add the colour to a separate layer on your document and it gets even easier, allowing you to quickly fix any mistakes you make while hand colouring, and also alter the strength and the style of the effect using layer opacity and blending modes. Okay, let's see how it's done by closing down our finished image there, and on this month's CD you'll find a picture called handcolour.jpg, which if you load into Photoshop or Elements you'll be able to practice on along with me. Right, so the first thing we need to do is monotone our image. So to do that, just press Ctrl and U on the keyboard or come up to Enhance, down to Adjust Colour and pick the Adjust Hue Saturation option there, and that'll bring up the Hue Saturation palette. Now what you can do is either start from a completely black and white image or apply a sort of subtle toning effect, which is what I'm going to do here. If you want to start from the black and white, just click on the saturation slider here and drag it all the way down to -100, and that'll give you a pure black and white image. But what I'm thinking is I want a little bit of kind of sepia tone just to fill in the gaps between the areas that I'm colouring. So I'm going to first click the Colorize button, then I'm going to click and drag the hue slider down to around 30. The saturation slider can then be used to control the intensity of the effect, but in this case I'm just going to leave that at its default setting of 25, and the lightness I'm also going to leave at its default setting of 0. Once you've done all that, just click OK to leave the palette, and now we can get on with our proper hand colouring. And the first step of this, as I mentioned in the introduction, is to add a new blank layer. So first let's bring up the Layers palette just by coming up to Window and down to Layers. I'll just drag mine in from the side of the screen here, make that a little bit smaller. And then to add the new blank layer, you can either click on the Create New Layer icon in the Layers palette, or you can come up to Layer, down to New and pick Layer. Or if you want to do it from the keyboard, just press the Shift key together with Control and then N. This will give us an option to name our new layer, and we're going to call this one Color, and click OK. And there our new blank layer appears in the Layers palette, and we can tell it's blank because it has this checkerboard effect. That means there are no pixels on it at all. The next thing we need to do before we start hand colouring our image is change the blending mode of the layer. You see up here at the moment it's set to normal, and if I was to try and start painting on this layer, just picking any old colour here, we'll just get a solid mass of colour. But by changing the blending mode of the layer to colour, just clicking on normal and selecting colour from the bottom of the list here, you see we get a translucent effect, meaning that the detail from the image below is still coming through, and we're really just colouring the parts that we want. So we'll just click on the eraser tool and get rid of that new colour for a moment. We return to a blank layer, and now it's time to click on the brush tool for real, set its size to 200 pixels, its mode to normal, opacity 100%, and then what we want to do right now is set its edge hardness to just a little bit lower than the maximum. So if you press Shift and the right square bracket key on the keyboard a few times and just keep your eye on this brush preview window at the top left hand corner, you'll see that edge harden up, and that's the maximum hardness we've got there now. So then we'll just press the Shift key and the left square bracket key once just to give it a little bit of fuzziness at the edge. So now that our brush is all set up, all we need to do is pick a colour to paint. So just as I did before very briefly, click on the foreground colour swatch there in the toolbox. That'll bring up the colour picker, and what we're going to do first is paint in some skin tones. So you can either kind of try and guess a kind of a good skin tone using the colour picker, or in this case I'm just going to set the red value to 255, green to 200, and blue to 150. Click OK to exit the colour picker, and then we'll just zoom in a bit so we get a reasonably close view of our subject. Just changing the brush size a little there down to 125 pixels just by using the left and right square brackets keys on the keyboard. That's the shortcut to change the brush size. And then we'll just start clicking on the image just to paint in those skin tones. Now you don't need to be too precise at this stage. We can go over the eyes and over the hairline a little bit. Just reduce the brush size again using those square bracket keys, and then to move around the image just hold down the space bar and click and drag. So when we kind of approach these areas of slightly finer detail, just making the brush quite small, all the way down at 10 pixels there, and then once you've done colouring in the face and neck area, just scroll all the way down to the model's hand and do the same there. So we can just once again increase that brush size a bit, just colouring over all of those areas that we want to be a skin tone. As I said before, don't worry too much if you kind of go outside the lines, because we'll be recolouring other parts of the image a little later. Okay, so that's our skin tones dealt with there. But before we continue and apply other colours to the picture, we're first just going to clean up the eyes here a little bit using the eraser tool. Give that a click in the toolbox, set its size to 10 pixels, the mode to brush, opacity to 100%, and then we'll actually just zoom in closer still, and then we'll just use the eraser tool to get rid of those areas where the skin tone has been brushed over the eyes. It's much easier to erase this afterwards than it is to be quite sort of fiddly when you're painting, and we'll also do it for the teeth here. And at the same time, sort of zooming in this close has shown me that we haven't quite kind of covered that jawline there, so back to the brush tool. We're still set to our flesh tone colour there. We'll just kind of paint that in so it's a little bit more neat. Okay, so back out to a full view, and that's already starting to have quite an interesting effect. What's going to make it more interesting, of course, is adding different colours to different parts of the image. So right now we're going to look at this coat, and we're going to click on the foreground colour swatch there again, and then we're going to set ourselves a nice kind of vibrant green colour, just dragging it over to the right hand side of the picker there, clicking OK, then bringing that brush size up again to about 300 pixels, and then we can just start clicking and colouring in that garment. And we'll work with the large brush to start with, before kind of controlling its size for the finer details. We're just trying to block in all this colour. Then use that zoom tool to get in nice and close, back to the brush, drop the size again, and then we can be a little bit more accurate with what we're doing. And if you want to reselect a colour that you've been using earlier, the best way to do this is first turn off the background layer using the eye icon in the layers palette so it disappears, and then just click on the foreground colour swatch, then use the colour picker there, click on the image, and it'll be reset to the one it was before. Click back on our background layer so we can see where we need to colour, and then we can continue with the job in hand. So I'm just going to carry on colouring in the coat here, and then I'm going to select some different colours to paint in other areas of the image, and I'll join you in a moment. Okay, so here we are, having applied colour to lots of different parts of the image using exactly the same method that we first did on the face and the hand. We've got this kind of green coat going on, this flaming red hair, and if we zoom right in on the model's face, you'll also be able to see that we've applied colour to the pupils and applied some lipstick there. Now it's also looking very vibrant at this stage because of the way that we've applied the colour, perhaps a little bit too vibrant. So what I'm going to do is make sure that the colour layer here in the layers palette is selected, and then just click and drag that opacity slider down to about 35%. And that immediately gives us a more sort of muted look, something that's a little bit more subtle and easier on the eye. And if you want to apply some different colour effects, it's also worth having a play with the blending modes menu up here in the layers palette. Changing it to options like overlay can give you quite a nice sort of more dramatic feel. I quite like that one, but we can also kind of make things a bit more garish using things like hard light, colour burn up here. That's quite moody, that one. We can use multiply. Give them all a try and see what works with your image. I'm going to stick to overlay, I think, because that's looking rather nice. And before I go, it's also worth pointing out that you can use the hue saturation palette, just as we did to tone the image, in the first step, just by pressing Ctrl and U on the keyboard to bring it up. And without ticking colorize this time, you can click and drag the hue slider around, and as I'm doing that, you'll notice that we're getting shifts in all of those colours in the image. So it's quite an interesting one to play with before you decide on your final colour scheme. I'm quite happy with the way it was though, so I'm going to leave my hand-coloured picture just like that. The last thing we need to do then is come up to Layer and down to Flatten Image, which will collapse our colour layer into the background. And then, when you save the file, make sure you don't save over the original full colour version, so that you've still got that one to go back to and play with in the future. Okay, hope you enjoyed that. Have a go with your own pictures and make sure you send them in to us at the magazine. See you next time.